A man in Minnesota dressed as Superman and mailed himself in a box to get a job at a radio station. He was hired, made a good savings, and spent almost all of it, around $400,000 US, only to do something fishy in his house that was drawing a ridiculously high amount of electricity. The DEA got suspicious that he was running a drug lab, so they raided his house. But what they found was not drugs. They found a jungle, fog machines, real parrots, a baboon, thunder sound effects. Even tortoises roamed the floor, like a theme park. The point? That guy had a crazy idea of starting a unique jungle-themed restaurant, and this was only the beginning. Investors laughed at first, and everyone thought he had lost his mind. But somehow, it worked, defying all the expert analysis and logic. And this man was none but Steven Schussler, who could go to any lengths for his dream venture. Rainforest Cafe. But how did such a one-of-a-kind cafe struggle to stand the test of time? Why did it fall? This is the story of the decline of Rainforest Cafe. A small spark lit up on the sparkling volcano desert. Thunder sounds played, the lights got darker, and rain fell from the ceiling. Fake animals moved as families looked around, smiling. This was the Rainforest Cafe, and at that time, it felt like magic. People talked about it like it was the future of all the cafes and restaurants. But of all things, why did Steven do this? Because he wanted to show people what was in his mind. He believed if they could see it, they would believe in it. And he really needed someone to believe in that dream. Eventually, he met a rich man and asked him to help with another restaurant inside a casino. But then, he showed him the rainforest, and Lyle said yes. Finally, in February of the year 1994, the Rainforest Cafe became a real company. And 8 months later, the first restaurant opened its doors inside the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. The response was unexpectedly wild. In the first week, people waited up to 3 hours just to eat there. Tables were full from morning until night. Everyone wanted to see what the jungle felt like. And it was not just the food that brought people in. There were tall, fake trees, fog machines, waterfalls, and huge fish tanks glowing with bright lights. Every 25 minutes, the lights would dim. Thunder would rumble. Rain would fall from above. Animatronic animals, like gorillas, elephants, and crocodiles, would begin to move and make sounds. It was like dinner inside a movie set. And with this, a new trend came into the market, called eatertainment. Each location of this cafe was like a small world of its own. The staff dressed up as safari guides. They did animal shows for kids. They gave short talks about saving the rainforest, because the company wanted the restaurant to be fun and educational. For that reason, schools even brought students there on field trips. So overall, the company grew fast. In the year 1995, this restaurant was making more money than anyone thought possible. That year alone, it made around $10 million US. $10 million. That's the kind of money you expect from giant hotel chains or blockbuster movies, not a place selling pasta and burgers in a shopping mall. But the numbers were real, and the profits were huge, almost 23%. For a restaurant, that was almost unheard of. When the news spread, a local journalist came to see it for himself and left amazed. Steven Schussler, the man behind this wild idea, knew he had something big, but he also knew he couldn't grow it alone further. So, in May of 1995, he brought in another man, Martin O'Dowd, who had helped build Holiday Inn and the Hard Rock Cafe. O'Dowd wasn't just experienced, he was a builder of empires. His job now? Take Rainforest Cafe and spread it far and wide. And that's exactly what happened. By the end of 1996, Rainforest Cafes were opening in major cities all over the United States. But the real gem was still to come. A giant flagship restaurant in Orlando, Florida, right next to Walt Disney World. It cost $12 million to build. And in just 4 days, 25,000 people walked through its doors. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. They wanted to build inside Disney's Animal Kingdom. They talked about opening in the Trump Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City. Even the towering Stratosphere in Las Vegas was a target. The vision was clear. Take the jungle everywhere. Put thunder, fake trees, and animatronic animals in every major city in the country. The company didn't just grow fast, it grew smart. Only 6 months after opening, Rainforest Cafe went public. That means it began selling shares of the company on the stock market. The price of the stock started at $6, but within a few months, it climbed into the mid-teens. By January of 1996, the stock peaked at $25, a 400% return. Naturally, investors were excited. They believed this wasn't just a good restaurant, it was the future of family dining. And they showed it with their wallets. By the end of the decade, each outlet was bringing in around $8 to $10 million a year. And the restaurant industry took notice. Awards poured in. Analysts called it one of the most exciting new restaurant chains in the country. But with such popularity, the team noticed that a lot of people had to stand in the queue and wait for a long time. Schussler and his team were smart. To entertain the waiting customers, they added gift shops to every restaurant. While parents waited for their table, their kids were buying stuffed animals, t-shirts, and toys. In fact, 1 out of every $4 made came from these gift shops. Schussler even dreamed of creating his own line of cartoon animal characters, toys, books, maybe even a kids' TV show. Something that could compete with Disney itself. Now, no wonder the idea was bold. And while that dream of becoming the next Disney didn't fully happen, the mix of retail and restaurant worked. By the middle of 1997, they opened their first restaurants outside the US, in London, Cancun, and Mexico City. This time, tourists also loved it. And by the end of that year, the price had jumped to about $30. So at this point, it might seem like a complete mystery, or even a miracle, how such a solid company could fall. But it did. And it's going to be a hell of a story to listen. Just a couple of months passed, and it was the early 1998. Rainforest Cafe was hit with a hard blow that caught many people by surprise, even though signs had been appearing for months. Its stock price suddenly dropped by 40% almost overnight. Because right from the middle of 1997, little problems were starting to pile up, but the management never bothered about taking any step for that. Even their big plans for new locations began to fail. One example was a fancy new restaurant at the Trump Taj Mahal Casino. That idea was suddenly dropped, and the company had to write off almost $2 million as a loss. Another plan to open a spot in the Las Vegas Stratosphere, which we mentioned earlier, has also been canceled. And don't think these were just small problems. They were like important pieces of a puzzle disappearing, and it didn't end there. In May of that year, suddenly, Martin O'Dowd, the president and chief operating officer, left the company. And he just gave a peculiar reason for that. Personal reasons. O'Dowd was an important leader, someone who many thought could help Rainforest Cafe grow and succeed. Losing him was like losing the captain of a ship during a storm. Not only that, around the same time, one of the biggest investors, Putnam Investments, also reduced its ownership in the company a lot. From about 13%, they decreased it to less than 2%. The result? Even big investors were losing confidence. Still, the company kept opening new restaurants, trying to keep moving forward. The real trouble, however, became clear in January 1998. The company announced that its earnings from the last 3 months of the previous year would be lower than expected. That raised the first red flag about the company. And the 3 oldest Rainforest Cafe locations in the United States saw their sales drop by 11% compared to the year before. When this news came out, the stock price fell sharply. Previously, the company was planning to raise money by selling something called convertible debt. This is a type of loan where investors lend money to the company, but instead of being paid back in cash, they have the option to be paid back with shares of the company later. This can be risky for existing shareholders because if the loan is converted into shares, it increases the total number of shares in the market. That usually makes each existing share worth a little less, like cutting a pie into more slices. But at this point, The management canceled that plan to protect its current shareholders and avoid weakening the value of its stock even more. But wish that could save the boat. Soon, lawsuits appeared from shareholders who said company insiders had known about the problems but sold their shares anyway. A newspaper in Minneapolis even called it a stormy day for Rainforest stock. So, let's get this straight. What once seemed like steady growth suddenly looked fragile. And honestly, Rainforest Cafe was not alone. At that time, themed restaurants were starting to lose their popularity. The craze for places like Planet Hollywood, which had opened over 30 locations in 1 year, was also fading fast. Landry's stock price dropped, which made the deal worth less than before. Some people who owned shares in the company didn't like that and didn't agree to the deal. One big investor, the Wisconsin Investment Board, even stopped the official vote from happening. And for that reason, the deal collapsed in the end. But Landry's was not willing to give up. They came back again in September with a new bid, much smaller, all cash, $75 million, which means $3.25 a share. No other buyers were in sight. So Rainforest's board and shareholders accepted the deal this time. The sale closed by the end of the year. So what happened here was, basically, the brand, once the darling of themed dining, had been sold for a fraction of its glory days. And with that takeover, Rainforest's story as a growing empire ended. Fertitta moved the headquarters to Houston, taking control himself. The first order of business: cut costs. Menus were simplified, prices cut to pull in more customers, and the restaurant layouts were redesigned for smoother service. Fertitta pointed to the high lease costs at malls as a major drain, deciding to close many underperforming locations. As a result, half of the 28 U.S. restaurants were shut down. Founder Schussler also later admitted they'd been stretched too thin. In the end, even running a t-shirt factory started distracting the team from running their core business. But could Landry's save the rainforest, or was the brand doomed to fade into a distant memory? Well, no big changes were made after the early 2000s. Instead of trying to bring the brand back to life, Landry's mostly kept things as they were, holding on to what remained but not pushing forward. In fact, the company didn't grow Rainforest Cafe at all. Instead, they slowly closed or changed many of the restaurants into other brands they owned, like Chart House. It was part of a bigger plan to grow through buying other businesses, not by making Rainforest bigger or better. So, the Rainforest restaurants that stayed open during the 2000s started to show their age. By the middle of that decade, nearly all of them were at least 10 years old. At the same time, the kind of family dining you found in malls, where many of these restaurants were, was becoming less popular. People's tastes were changing rapidly. The internet boom had already started then. People were going through a lot. Naturally, the old-school fake forest and rain didn't interest them anymore. They were getting tired of loud, artificial experiences and wanted food that felt simpler or more genuine. The signs were clear, even in the numbers. During the 2010s, the so-called entertainment places, restaurants that mixed food with games or shows, started to lose their customers fast. You take Dave and Buster's, for example. They were many of the biggest names in that world, which saw nearly 40% fewer people come in during just one 3-month period. Other places like it lost between 30 and over 50% of their visitors. This meant the kind of experience Rainforest Cafe offered was becoming much harder to keep alive. Plugs, as we said, after Landry's took over, Rainforest never became the exciting place it once was. It made most of its money from tourists visiting places like Disney Springs or casinos in Las Vegas, spots where visitors might come looking for nostalgia more than a real meal. Particularly, Planet Hollywood suffered huge losses, about $44 million in the last 3 months of 1997, and even filed for bankruptcy soon after. Fortune magazine explained that themed restaurants often enjoy a quick burst of excitement, but customers soon lose interest. People stop coming back as they become bored with this, and when too many similar places open, the market gets crowded, making growth impossible. Rainforest Cafe's stock and reputation were hurt because it was grouped with these failing chains. By the middle of 1998, One analyst noted that Rainforest's stock had not yet bounced back, even though its overall performance was still strong. The negative news from other restaurants was dragging it down, and by early 2000, the situation was really bad. Rainforest Cafe wasn't just struggling, it was teetering on the edge of collapse. Shares once soaring above $30 had crashed to less than $3. A contemporary Los Angeles Times article even described it as a troubled theme restaurant and a cash-needy company. You would have been literally surprised to see its unbelievable 4-year challenge, where the vibrant jungle-themed restaurants, once packed with eager crowds, were now quiet in many corners. The company's leaders fought hard, but the battle was slipping through their fingers. Back in February 1998, Steven Schussler, the visionary co-founder and executive vice president, was quietly pushed out of his role as chief operating officer. It was a sign. Rainforest was literally struggling to find a new direction or strategy because things were starting to go wrong quickly, and the situation was getting worse fast. They were trying to fix the problem before it became too big to handle. In May, Kenneth Brimmer, the steady hand managing the company's money, stepped up as president. But the change in leadership didn't spark a turnaround. The cash registers barely rang louder. The team tried everything to revive the spark. Smaller satellite cafes were planned outside the usual tourist hotspots, like planting seedlings away from a dying tree. They reached out beyond America, aiming to grow their brand in the UK, Mexico, Canada, and Asia. Menus were changed, reservations were introduced. Group discounts appeared to lure visitors back, hoping to turn first-timers into loyal fans. Yet none of it stopped the slow leak. In the meantime, it was expensive to run the large locations, and people were getting bored with the animatronic animals and old-school thunderstorm effects. By 1999, the magic was mostly gone. Around 26 to 28 restaurants still operated in the US, with a handful licensed abroad, but the energy was drained. Sales in stores that had been open a while stayed stubbornly low. In April, a deal was almost struck with Lakes Gaming for $125 million, and it mixed both stock and cash. But when shareholders of Lakes Gaming felt the price was too high, they pulled the plug. Behind the scenes, another small shareholder watched this quietly, waiting. Landry's. Then, in early 2000, everything hit rock bottom. And at this time, Landry's, led by Tillman Fertitta, stepped in with a formal offer of $125 million, about $5.23 per share, to buy Rainforest. The deal wasn't all paid in cash. Part of it was supposed to be paid using Landry's own company stock. But then, another unwanted thing happened. By the 2010s, much of what made Rainforest special had lost its sparkle. Families with young kids no longer cared much about mechanical animals or fake rainstorms. Just like their taste in video games and fun changed, their taste in restaurants changed too. Meanwhile, the costs of running a restaurant with all those noisy, moving decorations had become too much to bear. Even in recent years, between 2018 and 2020, Rainforest quietly closed some locations that weren't doing well, like those in Atlanta and the Anaheim Disney area. No big announcements, no fanfare, just a slow shrinking. The brand had been held back by too many restaurants, too much money spent just keeping things running, and most importantly, a stubborn unwillingness to change with what customers wanted. But the real question is this: with the brand fading and costs growing, why did Landry's keep holding on to Rainforest Cafe? What was the secret reason behind their quiet hope that this old favorite could still survive? The answer was unexpected, and it hinted at something much bigger than just a restaurant chain. The fall of Rainforest Cafe did not happen overnight. It was not one single mistake that brought it down, but many problems that built up over time. At the heart of it all was the rush to grow too fast. The company, led by CEO Lyle Berman and President Martin O'Dowd, opened dozens of huge, expensive restaurants by 1997. At first, this rapid growth seemed smart and exciting. People loved the jungle theme with lightning flashes, fog, and animal sounds. But as the novelty wore off in late 1997 and 1998, many of these restaurants began to lose customers. Because there were so many of them, the losses felt much bigger and harder to fix. If the company had taken a slower, more careful approach to opening new locations, maybe they could have avoided some of these problems. Instead, the fast expansion made the whole chain fragile when tastes changed. Basically, the transition from 1999 to 2000 was not only about stepping into a new year, new decade, or new century. It was like stepping into a completely new era, a huge change in a short span of time that no one ever saw before, all thanks to the internet. Rainforest Cafe also thought that it would be safe to expand as much as they wanted, because that way they could serve more people. But little did they know that pretty soon the world was going to change. The taste of people would change, and the massive empire of Rainforest Cafes would suddenly become obsolete. So, when the inflow of customers decreased, running these restaurants felt very costly. The special effects, the storms, the fog machines, the lights, used a lot of electricity and needed many workers to keep them working every day. Imagine a big house with a rainforest inside that costs $2,000 every month just to keep the lights and machines running. Now think about dozens of these giant restaurants, all using that much power. These high costs never really went down because the company did not try hard enough to save money by cutting back on the effects or upgrading to newer, cheaper equipment. When Landry's bought the company, they made quick changes like lowering prices, changing the menu, and trying to improve service, but these fixes came too late. Landry's also understood that, and they quickly decided to close about half the stores. It's a clear sign that the business model was not strong enough to survive without big cuts. Besides, another problem was that Rainforest Cafe's idea stopped feeling fresh after a while. The chain's success was based on visitors thinking, "Wow, this is cool," the first time they came in. But it gave few reasons for people to return again and again. Other similar restaurants started to change their menus often, let customers book tables ahead, and encouraged group visits. But Rainforest Cafe started trying some of these things too late. They had plans to create cartoon characters to attract kids and build a stronger brand like Disney does, but these ideas were never put into action. Without these deeper connections, the restaurant was just a fun place at first, but nothing more. And if that's not all, the company also lost important leaders at a critical time. When President Martin O'Dowd left in 1997, the company lost experienced people who knew how to keep things running well. Later, when the stock price dropped, some people inside the company were accused of selling their shares before the problems got worse. This exposed the fact that the company was more focused on short-term profits than building a lasting brand. Because they didn't plan ahead, it was harder to handle problems when they showed up. Other theme restaurants faced similar problems but acted differently. Hard Rock Cafe, for example, survived its own difficulties in the 1990s by growing into other businesses like casinos and selling branded clothes. And we already talked about Planet Hollywood's fate before. Rainforest Cafe did not do either. It waited too long to change and eventually sold itself cheaply to Landry's. But could Rainforest Cafe have been saved? Perhaps, yes. If the company had closed or changed the worst-performing restaurants earlier, it might have kept enough money to try new ideas. If it had refreshed its jungle theme with new animals, holiday decorations, or popular movie tie-ins, customers might have found reasons to come back. Loyalty programs or clubs for kids could have made visitors into fans who returned again and again. Most importantly, the company needed to cut costs before the problems became too big. The company also needed to keep up with changing tastes. By the late 1990s, people wanted faster service, healthier food, and new types of fun like video games. Plus, Rainforest Cafe's menu was never its strong point, and it did not innovate enough to keep customers interested. Some of these changes finally happened after Landry's took over. The menu and the look of the restaurants were updated, but this was years too late. By then, the excitement was gone, and Rainforest Cafe was fighting to survive, chasing a dream that had already slipped away. So, you will still see a handful of Rainforest Cafe running to date. Because luckily, they didn't have to meet the same fate as Planet Hollywood. But no one knows how long it can put on the show. You might wonder, is there anything this restaurant can do to spark up the fire again? We don't know. But all we have is a clue. The same founder who started this cafe later made a dinosaur-themed restaurant that keeps changing with time and staying fresh. Because he never sold it to any other businessman and only his passion and creativity kept it relevant. So maybe his ideas could have saved Rainforest Cafe as well. But that's nothing but a benefit of doubt. What do you say? Could it save the cafe from downfall? Or even more, can it help the cafe bounce back to its old charm again? Share your views in the comments below. And if you liked this video, just give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel because next, we're going to talk about a company that you are extremely familiar with. Nobody expected it to fall, but it did.